Jason, I am super excited about this Apple show. I brought my big Apple, and I brought tons of other Apple things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like the Beatles were on Apple Records.
Yeah.
And then, of
they
course,
were.
you've got Fiona Apple. And I think I'll just take a bite of the Big Apple to get us started.
All right.
Wasn't a good bite, but hey.
What we were actually talking about was doing a show about bands from New York and songs about New York City.
We're not talking about Big Apples?
Well, finish your bite of apple, and we'll get the thing rolling.
Vinyl Gang, we're coming at you with not an Apple story, but the Big Apple. The Big Apple being New York City.
And when we did our cities, towns, and places, I think we discovered that New York is only second behind London as the place where, that more people write about, like the city that more people write about. And here in the U.S., so many bands and scenes started in New York City.
Yeah, it's really the epicenter of music.
Yeah, and culture and fashion and on and on and on. So we thought that as our first episode of 2025, technically, that we would do a show about New York City. And that's what we're going to do. And John may bite into his apple throughout the show.
Yeah, I may get hungry.
But the other thing that we always want you to remember is you can go to our YouTube channel and see all of that video magnificence that exists there. We have full shows, we have shorts, we have unboxings, which we haven't done in a while. But we want you guys to go there, explore the universe of Vinyl Ventures there on YouTube, because it's pretty immense at this point.
Indeed it is.
And I want to thank Jacob Hansen and Keith Toombs for all of the help and all of the heart that they've put into the show to help us get, close to our 80th episode. This is 79.
That's amazing.
Yeah, if you can believe this. I haven't done anything 79 times, I don't think.
Well,
maybe some things. So when you were a young teen, at that time, there was a lot going on in New York, and a lot coming to the rest of the country from the East Coast. What was that like?
it was just one of those places that you look, because at the time there's no internet. So you're looking at magazines and you're like, oh, that band's from New York. That's amazing. And you just hear stories about everything going on in New York. And I mean, CBGB's was still happening. So it's like, and that's the kind of music that really appealed to me.
The CBGB scene.
Yeah.
So the stuff in the Village. So, yeah. And we'll talk about some of those bands here in a little bit. Yeah. It's always been kind of since probably in the last 10 years, my wife and I have started going there about once a year. And man, I have felt closer to all of that music that comes from there because it's such a vibrant, electric type city. And when you're there, you can't even put words to it, but there is a feeling in the air. And you can understand, I can understand how artists, musicians, painters, sculptors, people in the fashion industry, I can understand how they get inspired by being in that place.
Yeah, and although we're concentrating on New York City, it's the five boroughs, because there's scenes that have happened in Queens and Brooklyn, all across.
Yeah, and it's just again, you say that we're going to do a show on this or that, and you start to worry in your mind, but you start flipping through the records, and the amount of records I have, we could do 5 or 10 shows on New York City.
Yeah, we could just do New York City for the rest of the year, and we wouldn't cover everything.
So we may do some shows going forward about other areas of the country, other scenes, other countries. But we thought we'd start with the Big Apple and really confuse John as to what we're doing. So another distinction here, John, I believe, is only talking about bands from New York, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, all the bands from New York have a song about New York.
Yes.
It may be a song about a taxi cab, but it's about New York.
Yeah, and I will be doing some bands from New York, artists from New York, and some songs about New York that may or may not be by bands from New York. So what's your first example?
My first example, I like that. My first example, Jason, is going to be...
I don't think I've ever used that word.
No.
Right? Oh, okay.
I'm glad.
In 79... In 79 episodes. Your first band.
First band.
And I bet I can guess what it is without you even showing us. So I will take this.
I got to start with the Velvet Underground. I've talked about the Velvet Underground a bunch. I love that band. And they're one of the most influential bands in music.
And one of the most New York bands.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. When they were Andy Warhol's house band at the factory.
Yeah.
And I think at one point they were even living there, but it's all very muddy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for us, it's muddy because of the sands of time. For them, it's muddy because of
the sands of time.
The chemicals of time the time.
But yeah, the Velvet Underground started in '64.
Really?
But yeah, they went through another drummer until Mo replaced the previous drummer, and that was really the band. It was Lou Reed, John Cale, Sterling Morrison, and drummer Angus McLeese. And McLeese is the one that was replaced by Mo Tucker.
Oh, okay.
And that's the band that released Nico, the Velvet Underground and Nico on the first album. Nico was in the band, but just for that one album.
Yeah. I remember in the late 80s, Lou Reed had that album, New York.
Yeah.
And that was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a comeback and a callback to the VU.
Yeah, and Lou was New York through and through.
Yeah.
I mean, 100% New York.
Yeah. And such an interesting dude.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, kind of like America's answer to David Bowie, almost.
Yeah, he just had his own way of doing everything.
Yeah.
And he kind of did it the Lou Reed way.
Yeah. I have never seen this album.
Yeah, this is, and I brought this one because I've probably talked about the rest of them nonstop. So I brought VU, which is a collection of unreleased recordings.
I love the VU meter there.
Yeah.
It's just on the nose, but very cool.
Yeah.
And then there's a picture of the band.
Shot of the band.
That's
contemplating.
It's so cool. I mean, I don't think any of these dudes started in this band expecting them to become, maybe they had those high aspirations.
Yeah.
And they were associated with Warhol and everything, but I don't think any of them ever could have imagined that we'd still be talking about them like almost 60 years later.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's pretty phenomenal that they never really had much commercial success. Mm-mm. But, I think people digging through records discovered them and they're like, wow, this is some really great stuff. They've been covered endlessly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Well, that's a great one to start with because there really isn't any more, like deeply New York band than them.
No.
Yeah.
They're New York through and through, 100%. And their first album was 67. Mm-hmm. And really, there were some other albums when Lou left the band, but really it was, that the core group. I mean, the stuff they released in the 70s, not really the Velvet Underground.
Right.
So really, I mean, the Velvet Underground and Nico, White Light, White Heat, and the Velvet Underground. And this is, just a collection of unreleased stuff. So it's not really technically a studio recording, but
yeah. No, that's a good one to start with.
Yeah.
And especially today, bands like this who maybe don't have an extensive catalog, the record company is always going to find ways to expand that catalog. My wife and I have been watching the Stax doc, and we've watched the first 2 parts, and the end of the second part is basically Atlantic Records takes their entire catalog because of a bad contract that one of the owners of Stax signed with Atlantic. And, that's a heartbreaking corner of that story. But yeah, the record companies always find a way, whether they're unreleased recordings or B-sides or live stuff, they always find a way. Yeah, for sure.
So the Velvet Underground, I think that's a good one to start with.
Oh, I do too. Another just through and through example of New Yorkers, a New York group, Simon and Garfunkel. This is Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. And the reason that I brought it, they are New York, great example of a New York artist in the early era of pop music just exploding. But the 59th Street Bridge song is on this album. And, that's the Queensboro Bridge, basically. And it's never really been one of my favorite, like, Simon and Garfunkel songs. I know you're not really a Paul Simon guy. But when I listen to this stuff, whether it's on vinyl or whether I listen to a digital recording of it, I think of New York.
Oh,
And funny enough, the 59th Street Bridge song features Dave Brubeck quartet members Joe Morello, who was on drums, and Eugene Wright on the double bass. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit.
That's super cool.
Yeah, Brubeck is such a great jazz artist, and one of those jazz artists that anybody can listen to, right?
Yeah.
And you got to work with his family.
Yeah, his sons.
Yeah.
And they were old guys when I worked with them.
Yeah.
But they played a bunch of Dave's catalog, and it was so cool to see those guys, to hear that music live.
Yeah. Yeah. And for them to celebrate the music that their dad kind of brought jazz to the masses.
Yeah.
Because, jazz had roots in New Orleans and Chicago and New York, but there's so many artists, so many jazz artists from New York that, at the time in the 40s and 50s, a lot of those artists were black. But Brubeck was a white guy.
Yeah.
And he's one of those dudes that brought that music to the masses, to the rest of us.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, I've always loved Simon and Garfunkel because I spent so much time as a kid. My parents loved them. My aunt loved them. So I just spent so much time as a kid listening to them. And this does, speaking of jazz, have that full jazz treatment.
Oh, yeah.
On the back of it. So, yep, Simon Garfunkel, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme.
And when they did their kind of reunion comeback, it was a concert in Central Park.
Mm-hmm. In 1981.
Yeah.
And, I had high hopes of seeing those guys. I think the last tour that they did, it was probably 10 or 11 years ago. They got back together, but I ended up never getting to go see them. But I also, when Kiss ended, which was a little over a year ago now, I had, before any of the plans were announced, I had high hopes for Kiss, like doing what they did, like a free concert in Central Park.
Yeah. If you look at pictures from that concert, it is just packed.
Yeah. Yeah. I had high hopes for Kiss to do that, but no, they didn't. They played at Madison Square Garden. But yeah, it's really fun. I put this on yesterday. It's really fun to go back and listen. This isn't an album I'm going to pull out a lot.
Yeah.
But it's really fun.
It's good mood music.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. Yep.
That's nice.
Thanks, man.
Well, the next one is kind of a unusual band. Maybe I talked about this band one other time. It's another kind of artsy band, Suicide.
Okay. I think you mentioned them before.
Yeah.
I love that cover.
Yeah. They're, trying to pinpoint they're art rock.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very avant-garde. They have a song, Red Leatherette, and they say that probably 30. It's like I Love a Rainy Night by
Eddie Rabbit.
Eddie Rabbit, it just goes on. They say it all over and over, but it's just a groove. I mean, these guys were using electronics and Moogs. Mm-hmm. And this was 77, and they played, they were part of that whole Village New York scene where they're playing Vultures and Max's Kansas City and CBGBs. They were just unusual. Two guys, and they started in 69.
Really?
Yeah. And they were just making music. I mean, they're a little bit like, maybe like Devo.
Okay.
Where they're making this, music they want to make. Mm-hmm. They're not trying to make a hit record. They're just trying to make music.
Yeah, the hit record came to Devo as opposed to Devo going to the hit record.
Yeah. And let's see. It was the members were really Alan Vega and Martin Rev.
Okay. What's on the back here? Oh, there they are.
Yeah.
Alan and Martin. Yeah,
just two guys. They've done other things, but nothing's really taken off like this.
Oh man, I do. I love the way that looks against the set. That's cool.
Yeah, it looks good against our set for sure.
Is this their only release?
No, they have a couple of releases. Not many. I mean, they have, they had this that came out in 77, an album that came out in 80 that was Suicide, Alan Vega, and Martin Rev. Album that came out in 88, which was more of a slightly different mix, but it was pretty much, just reinventing the tunes.
Yeah.
And then a couple more albums, but I mean, really, this is the one that kind of put them on the map.
I know you've mentioned them, but I don't think you've ever brought a record in. And I've heard the name too. It's just another one that's just out of my purview that I've never checked out. So it'll have to go on the list of bands that I should listen to that Wheels likes. And
they had a song called Ghost Rider, which I love.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those. It's just this electronic Ghost Rider. They're very much talk singers. Very much, it checks that box for me.
Yeah, it checks that box.
That's cool. They toured, they opened for the Cars.
Huh. Okay.
Because they were part of that Village scene. Mm-hmm. But they were like the weird kid who sat in the corner.
Yeah, well, I've known a couple of those. I may or may not have been one of those at one time. So, well, that's cool. I love the way that looks. It kind of reminds me of the artwork for Rage.
Yeah.
Just black, white, and red.
Yeah, there's not much to it.
Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. Suicide, folks, check it out. Well, speaking of bands from New York City, this is Anthrax, and this is one of my absolute favorite Anthrax records. This is a John Bush era Anthrax record called "We've Come for You All." But Anthrax is one of the big four thrash metal bands. So you've got Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax. They started in like 1982 or 3, and they had a totally different singer back then. But when Joey Belladonna kind of joined the group, that's when the band really started to take off. And he was their singer until I think 1992. Then John Bush came in. He was with the band until I want to say 2006. And then Joey Belladonna came back, and they've done 2 full albums with Joey Belladonna again. And I think they have a new one coming out this year. I always liked Anthrax, and they are absolutely New Yorkers through and through. And they were really one of the first East Coast thrash bands to really break through too. But I've always liked them. But when John Bush came into the band, his voice to me just is much more appropriate for the type of music that it is. And I really, really got steeped into the John Bush era. And I say that, and the album they did with Belladonna when he came back in the band, I think it was in 10 or 11, 2011. They did an album, a reunion album with Joey Belladonna called Worship Music, and that's literally, even though I'm not a huge Belladonna fan, that's like the best album that they've done with him. So for a band to have that long of a history and multiple singers, to put an album out like that's that good is really great. I've always loved the cover of this. You've got the band members and people's hands coming at them.
And it's cool that they're still pumping away.
Yeah. They're proud New Yorkers. I love the artwork in the gatefold here.
Oh yeah,
Try to keep that from reflecting. So each song, I mean, they've got pictures of the band, and then each song kind of has a piece of artwork with it. They just really they really check a box for me that none of the other big four bands do, because they don't have that like screamy, growling vocal. None of them really do. Slayer kind of does. And there's a pop sensibility to this band, even though they're playing thrash.
Yeah.
And, they've had a really long and successful career, but I'm really excited to see what they come up with for this newest album that they're going to do. But yeah, this was just put on vinyl like 2 years ago, I think. And it's one of those, it's like a no-brainer. Yes, give me that. So Anthrax, folks, if you have not checked them out, any era of Anthrax, give it a listen and see what you think.
All right. We can't do a New York show and not mention this band.
All right. I'm ready. Yes, you are correct.
The Ramones.
Yes. They're the first one I thought of.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just don't have a lot of Ramones on vinyl. I have all their stuff on CD. I don't have a lot of Ramones.
They have a lot of vinyl to choose from.
Yeah. Of varying quality.
Yeah. They formed in 1974 in Queens.
Yep.
And they were. It's kind of funny because every member of the Ramones took the surname Ramone.
Yep.
And then they used their first name or whatever name.
Joey, Dee,
Johnny.
Yeah.
And they've had a couple of other members, but it's just one of those bands they've done the same thing. The only album that sounds a little bit different is the Spectre album. Mm-hmm. But it's really the same thing every album.
Well, we've talked about bands that do that. And the first one that comes to mind, usually is the Ramones. The second one that usually comes to mind for me is AC/DC.
Yeah.
I mean, they do what they do, and that's it.
Yeah. This is what you're going to get.
Yeah, and they make no bones about it.
No.
And with the Ramones, I mean, we've talked about them before because they kind of are the largest looming like pop culture and musician like band to me. When, like I said, the first thing that popped into my mind was the Ramones. And then I love the back of this because here's the shot of the globe and the dude giving the peace sign on the rocket.
Yeah,
which is obviously heading for Russia.
Rocket to Russia.
Yeah.
They were part of the whole New York punk scene, which was big. I mean, there were like two big cities in the punk scene, London and New York.
Yeah. Just across the Atlantic from each
Yeah.
other. Yeah, that's a good one. I've always loved this shot of them too, because it literally looks like they just, hey guys, let's go out into the alley and take a photo.
Yeah, it's very similar to their first album.
Yeah.
And I think they probably would have, because they'd record these albums in a week,
Yeah.
if not a day.
Yeah.
It was quick.
Yeah. This one always stands out because of the
Yeah.
pink,
Yeah.
which is very cool over the black and white photo. I love it, man. I love the Ramones. I need to get more.
Yes.
I have Subterranean Jungle, I think. And that might be the only one I have on vinyl. Yeah. So I got some spending to do.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, they kind of ushered or helped usher in that whole scene. They were, I'm not going to call them a house band at CBGB's, but they played there a lot. But they're as their market value took off, they branched out quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I never got to see them. I know they played here. Did you ever see them?
Yeah, I saw them one time at the Vogue.
How was that?
Oh, it was great.
Yeah. I bet it was full too, wasn't
Oh,
it?
it was packed.
Yeah. Yeah. When was that? 90s?
It would have been
Early 90s?
No, it was in the 80s. It was probably 88,
Okay.
87.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know what just happened to you when you thought there.
Yeah, that was my thinking squint.
Yeah, I never had the chance to see them. And they I have that list in my head of like bands if they ever got back together, I would definitely see, and they are way up there. Never
Yeah.
going to happen.
No.
I mean, I thought the Police reunion was never going to happen or the Kiss reunion was never going to happen, but you never know. Modern technology, they may bring Joey back and the rest of the guys.
Yeah, they can do a virtual AI version,
Hologram version of the
Yeah.
Ramones. How about that? If Elvis can do it, they can.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I
So
love it.
that's the Ramones starting off my whole CBGB era.
Okay. So my next one is not only a band from New York that is one of the first ones that comes to mind. It's a song that's one of the first ones that comes to mind. And
Twofer.
it's a twofer.
I'll give you the drum roll.
Thank you. It is Mr. Ace Frehley from Kiss, which this album blows the rest of the solo albums out of the water. Paul's is a close second. But, they are through and through, they're a New York band, and they're very proud of it. Their last show was in New York a little over a year ago, and the song that we're talking about on this album is Back in the New York Groove. And that song was written by a dude named Russ Ballard. It was recorded by a band, a glam rock band named Hello in 1975. And then in 1978, when Ace was putting his solo album together, he recorded it on that. And it's just a standout song. I mean, it's got a great groove. It's like something that you go to Yankees games, you hear it multiple times. I mean, it's a great song. And the thing about this album is like when when fans of Kiss found out that they were all each going to do a solo album, I mean, the one thing in everybody's mind is, what the hell is Ace going to do? You know,
Yeah.
and then he puts this together, and it's so good and so great. I just love the song. There's another version of this song on an Ace Frehley tribute called, I think it's called Spacewalk. And I don't know who the artist is, but the version of New York Groove on that one is also really, really good.
Well, it's one of those songs that is so good that you know it's a song that's going to be hard to not have a great version of.
Right. And you know, the other thing is, unless you're like a liner note dork, most people don't know who writes this music. Most listeners just assume that whoever is the person singing it had something to do with writing it. Well, we know through the entirety of music history that doesn't always happen. It doesn't really even happen that often. But when you can take a song like this that was written by someone else for another band, record it, and it sounds like he wrote it, you know? And that's a pretty tall order to come up with, especially for a guy like Ace that would drink a case of champagne before a show.
Yeah. If you can make a song your own.
And I don't have this on its own. This is the version out of my Kiss solo albums box. And I just want to show everybody the vinyl on this because it's so cool.
Each one had its own color.
Yeah. So you have the Casablanca label with the Ace face in the middle there. This solo albums box set, sometimes I'll look at the amount of records I have and then start doing math and go, why did I buy this or that? But I do not regret buying this solo albums box set because these sound so good and look so awesome. But yeah, I mean, Kiss is just through and through like one of those bands that you think of when you think of New York City. So, Ace, the solo album, 1978. What's your next example?
The next one is another New York artist through and through who I've talked about many times. Patti Smith.
Yes, I knew you were bringing
a
Patti Smith record. I mean, she is New York.
Yeah, she is New York.
Yeah.
And this is kind of funny because this is the first album, Horses, came out as just Patti Smith. And then it was the Patti Smith Group.
Okay.
And this is the first album as the Patti Smith Group. And
Easter.
Mm-hmm. And if we flip it over, you see the group. And look who produced it. Jimmy Iovine.
Oh, Jimmy Iovine. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And this was in 1977.
I was looking for Patti on this. This is the group.
Yeah, that's the group. Patti, of course.
Patti's on the front.
She's taking up the front in that very sexy picture.
Hey, you know, if you don't, if you don't want to shave your armpits, fine, don't. Patti, you know how Patti rolls.
She was a big part of that whole New York punk scene, and I mean. One of the ethos of punk was to shock, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know, I respect. I've got the book that she wrote called Kids. I got it last year sometime, and it's about her and Mapplethorpe.
Yeah.
And we've talked about them before. I need to finish that book because I have only just skimmed through it, but everybody tells me what a great book it is, and it tells that story of them being young artists in New York City. She is in and of herself for sure.
Yeah, and this has a song that was written by her and Bruce Springsteen.
Classic.
Yes.
Because of the Night.
Because of the Night.
Yeah.
And they both wrote it.
Yeah.
Which is that's kind of different. You
Yeah.
wouldn't expect Patti Smith to write a song with Bruce Springsteen.
Right, and I think 10,000 Maniacs did a version of that
Oh
song.
yeah, on the Unplugged,
On the Unplugged.
which was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great song anyway.
Yeah.
Springsteen has co-written many
Yeah.
songs that most people probably wouldn't even know. But again, that goes back to that liner notes kind of thing. Some people just don't care about that stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I really love digging into. And I'm glad that vinyl records are back, because it's much easier to read this on a record or a inner sleeve than it was those little miniature CD sleeves. So
Yeah. So it's, she was just so much entrenched in that whole scene.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, she was and when Horses took off in 75, she was already on the map.
right.
So people were looking to her for influence and inspiration.
Yeah. What is your favorite of her albums? Would it be Horses?
Yeah, Horses.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I'm glad you brought a different one.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've seen this before.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was on I don't know what album
It
was,
could have been
or which show it was.
It could have been one where we just picked up some stuff at a show.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah. But I'm glad, because I knew. I'm like, I mean, I don't have any of her stuff on vinyl or CD, but I'm like, I know John's going to bring one. So
it's a different taste.
Yeah, Patti Smith is definitely someone who deserves to be mentioned.
Yeah, and she is very much a talk singer. So there's that.
Well, I've talked about this album before. This is Honky Chateau by Elton John, and this album came out in 1972. This has always been like one of my favorite Elton records, and I've kind of shown the record before. Well, I'm not going to. Well, yeah, I will. So it opens up, and it's got these shots of the guys in the band, and of course there's Bernie with his shirt on this time. But I've always loved the gatefold of this.
Yeah, that's nice.
The way that it opens up, and but Elton, obviously one of the biggest artists from Britain, for sure. But there's a song on this called Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, and it's written basically, the lyrics, according to Bernie, conveyed his take on New York City after hearing a gun go off near his hotel window during the first visit that he had to New York. And the song's lyrics were partly inspired by Benny King's Spanish Harlem, which is obviously written by Jerry Lieber and Phil Spector, in which he sings "There's a Rose in Spanish Harlem." That little line gets repeated in Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters. So like there aren't a lot of songs by Elton on first listen that you would think are about New York. But he writes about other places, Philadelphia. But this is one of those songs and one of those albums of his that I just absolutely adore. And I was going through my Elton John stuff, and I've got a lot of his albums, but I also am missing like those albums from like 84 to like 90. I think it was The One came out in 90, and that was one of his like comeback records. But there were some records in there, like I think Leather Jackets is one of them that I don't have, and those are basically the only Elton albums that I don't have. And he's got a pretty extensive catalog at this point. But he did the farewell tour that ended, I think, early last year. And supposedly he's done touring, but I think he's one of those artists, and he and Bernie both are artists that are always going to be recording new music.
Yeah.
And but the other song on here is I Think I'm Gonna Kill Myself, which is a fantastic song. Rocket Man is on this album, and it starts out with Honky Cat. So he got into a groove between this album and like Tumbleweed Connection. He was on another like level, and I've always loved Elton, and he gets compared so often to Billy Joel, and of course they did the tours together years ago. But the thing that sets Billy Joel apart from any of them is he does it all.
Yeah.
I mean, he writes the lyrics, writes the music, plays it, sings it, and but yeah, I've always thought it's kind of funny too, because Elton and Billy come so close to each other in the alphabet. So the Elton, the Billy stuff is right before Elton.
Yeah.
So if you're alphabetizing according to last name, which people have varying opinions on that. There is a 50th anniversary of this that came out a couple years ago. I haven't plunked the money down because I've got 2 copies of it myself. So,
yeah.
But Honky Chateau, check it out because it's a less produced, less lush kind of thing for Elton. But like I said, he was as an Elton fan, this is my sweet spot for sure. So, Honky Chateau, y'all.
Nice. Well, I gotta
all you honkies.
I gotta correct something.
Uh-oh.
I said 77, 78.
Oh, so
78.
Okay. That's fine.
That's just me.
Hey,
riding the ship.
We make mistakes occasionally.
Yes, because we do this, as we mentioned to a listener, we do this more like a live radio talk show. So there's going to be flubs.
There's going to be flubs. There's going to be missed details and messed up dates. But when you're so enthralled by the music, the details don't always matter. What's your next one?
Well, next we're sticking in the Village.
Okay.
Another band that helped make CBGB's the mark that it was, the Talking Heads. The Heads formed in New York in 75, and this album is Remain in the Light.
Actually, they formed in Rhode Island, didn't they?
They met in Rhode Island.
Okay, because they all went to RISD.
Yeah, they met in Rhode Island at the School of Design.
Yeah, Rhode Island School of Design.
And then they moved to New York because in Rhode Island, it was David Byrne, Chris France, and Tina Weymouth.
Mm-hmm. And then they went to New York, and Jerry joined the group. Yeah. They're so, like, there have been bands since them, like Modest Mouse. When I hear the first time I ever heard Modest Mouse, that's hard to say. I was like, oh my God, this is the closest thing I've heard to the Talking Heads. And not that they were ripping them off, but they just have that similarity. But there is no band, no artist like the Talking Heads.
No.
For sure.
And their first album came out in 77. And it was the 77. Talking Heads 77.
Yep.
That's a great way to name an album.
Yeah, why not? I've always loved the cover of this too.
Yeah. I love that, and people may not realize how the Talking Heads, the A's are upside down.
Yeah. I don't think you even, when you first
don't
look
even
at this,
realize it.
Your brain doesn't process that.
No.
Your brain turns it right side up. Yeah. As a matter of fact, looking at it here, until you said that, I really hadn't even noticed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're so great, man. This, let's see. Once in a Lifetime is on here.
And this was part of their collaboration with Eno. This is when Eno came into the fold.
Yeah. Yeah. He's something else as well. Eno, Talking Heads. I mean, there's an art element, almost a performance art element to it. And when we saw David Byrne, probably 5 years ago now,
Yeah.
6 years ago, he always puts on a show, like a really, really great show.
He is such a amazing performer.
Yeah.
He's a strange dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love David because he still rides a bike around New York.
Yeah. Yeah. If every time we're there too, especially down near the Village, I'm like, keep an eye out for David Byrne because he's probably
He might be just pedaling around.
pedaling right by you. And then I'd absolutely lose my shit if I ran into him. But they are. Part of me wishes they would, like, at least maybe not do an album, but play a show together again, just one more time.
Just one more time.
But I know that he's probably not into that, and the relationship between the band isn't that great between he and the band.
Yeah.
I know Jerry Harrison and another guy were touring together and playing some of the Talking Heads music.
And if you ever get a chance, Jerry Harrison's solo stuff is really, really good.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've never really dug into it, but he was on a podcast I listened to, and it kind of made me realize I need to dig into his stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, man.
Remain in the light.
Talking Heads. Well, there's another band that when you think of New York City, you think of them. This is Beastie Boys, and this is To the Five Boroughs. Most people would assume that if I'm talking about a Beastie Boys song about New York, that I would do No Sleep Till Brooklyn. Well, as we've discussed before, I do not like that album. I do not like that song. I came into the Beastie Boys at Paul's Boutique, and to me, that's where they began. But they were actually together. They got together early in the 80s and were kind of a punk band.
Yeah, their early stuff, they were punk.
They kind of began as a punk band and then moved into the hip hop and rap stuff. And then, later in their career, they kind of showcased it all. But I've always loved the cover of To the Five Boroughs. You've got, obviously the Twin Towers there. And it's a gatefold drawing. But this, like, pen on paper drawing is just gorgeous. And then I love this. Check this out. You've got the Brooklyn Bridge.
Oh, yeah.
And all the lyrics and stuff in there.
There's a lot of lyrics.
Yeah. So An Open Letter to New York City is the song on this, and that came out in November 2004. It's the fourth and final single from this album, and it entered and peaked at number 38 on the UK singles chart. It was used during the opening credits on an episode of HBO's Taxi Cab Confessions, and is also included in the video game NBA Street Volume 3. The group performed the song live during the 2004 MTV Europe Music Awards on November 18th, 2004. So, they have quite a catalog, and when you listen to their catalog, you're taken on a ride because, the first album was basically a party album that you listen to all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and how old were you when that came out?
I was in college.
You were in college?
Yeah.
Okay, so I could see where that would just be a
freaking
phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're taken on a ride through their catalog just because they are kind of an open tap of so many different influences and kinds of music, and all three of them are from New York. Obviously, MCA isn't around anymore, R.I.P. But they are such a singular band, and I had to mention them here because I've always loved this. I remember when this album came out, I lived not too far from where I live now, and I brought it home, and I had a little It was before digital music, really. So I had a little ghetto blaster. I threw the CD in and just sat and listened to it. So Beastie Boys, To the Five Boroughs. Check it out, y'all.
That's nice.
Thank you.
That was kind of a Beastie Boys callback. Check it out, y'all.
Yeah. Check it out. I'll leave my rapping out of the final cut of this show. What's your next one? I think I can see part of it.
Next on the list, we're going to stay in the Village for one more. Blondie. And Blondie was formed in 74 with Debbie Harry and Chris Stein. And this is Parallel Lines that came out in 78.
Mm-hmm. This is like their big one.
Yeah, they'd already signed a big contract with Chrysalis Records.
Yeah.
And that was kind of for all the CBGB Village type bands that played at Max's and CBGB's. It was kind of like they've got a big contract, it was kind of a shocker.
Yeah.
Because they were one of the staples of that scene.
Yeah.
But they kind of became more known as a new wave band as opposed to a punk underground band.
And again, this came out in 78 and disco is just like has exploded by that time. So there was a lot of cross-pollination going on between disco, punk, rock, pop, new wave.
Yeah.
But that, although I just said that, you could also say it could have been pretty freeing for this, for this whole group of bands that were coming up. At that time, because you could basically do anything you wanted.
Yeah.
Now, Kiss, later in the 70s, 79, I Was Made for Loving You. They caught a lot of blowback for kind of being disco Kiss. Grateful Dead at the time had Shakedown Street, and they got a lot of blowback for it. But what is popular at the time is always going to affect, who is doing what. So
absolutely.
Yeah. They were one of the first big female fronted bands.
I think the record companies latched onto that because she's a pretty attractive individual as well. So they're like,
I hadn't noticed.
You hadn't noticed?
No.
But so I think they latched onto it and they're like, ooh, this is somebody we can really promote
and market
to the masses, not just to a bunch of dudes, but to everybody.
Yeah. No, they were a really cool band. I love the pictures on the back.
Yeah.
Because you've got this and then the close-ups of their feet.
I love the, all the band in the black and white suits and Blondie and the white top.
Yeah. It's cool. What's the big tune off this? One Way or Another.
Yeah.
And then Heart of Glass. Yeah. Yeah, I've got this. It's an inherited record.
Nice.
Yeah. They don't have a huge catalog.
No, they disbanded after their 6th album, The Hunter in 82.
Yeah.
I think by that point they just kind of made it to where they wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. And then Deborah Harry had kind of a solo career, but never really had a big hit.
Yeah, and they reformed in 97, but it was, I think that the time had already passed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good one, man. It's always cool to call attention to them because I think that they kind of get forgotten a lot of the time.
I think they do.
Yeah. But no, they're great. And I think Chris Stein, he's put out a few books, photography books. I think he took a lot of pictures during that time as well.
Those are cool to see when the band members take all the behind the scene photos.
Yeah, because you're seeing photos from a perspective that you normally don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a good one, man. Nice choice.
Blondie.
So I talk about this band kind of a lot. This is their last album. This is Steely Dan, Everything Must Go. And this came out, I think, in 2003. But the reason we're talking about Steely Dan is they were another when I'm thinking of New York bands,
Oh yeah.
this is it. And this one is different because when you listen to their music, and the reason that their music is so polarizing sometimes is because there is so much jazz influence in their music. But when you think about it, they're from Annandale. They're from New York, and New York in the U.S. is one of the huge epicenters of jazz.
Yeah.
So of course that is going to seep into the music of the bands coming up. Donald Fagen and Walter Becker started in 1971. They were in a variety of bands from their time together, studying at Bard College. And they later moved to Los Angeles, gathered a band of musicians, and began recording albums. The first albums, Can't Buy a Thrill, in 1972. And it kind of established that template for their career, that kind of rock, pop, jazz fusion. And I love this album. I wish that they put more music out, but they did not. But this is such a great album. If you remember in 2000, I think it was 2001, Two Against Nature came out, and they hadn't put an album out since 1980, Gaucho. And in 2001, they put Two Against Nature out, and that ended up winning the Grammy for Album of the Year in 2001. Fagen and Becker both did solo projects, but they always worked together on solo projects. But yeah, I love these pictures of the two of them on the back, because you've got Donald Fagen here who's holding this keyboard, and then Walter Becker, who played a lot of guitar and bass on all of their stuff. So yeah, if you get a chance, and you're okay listening to Steely Dan, check out Everything Must Go. But the other, and I know I just talked about this, but there is a song on Katy Lied called Daddy Don't Live in That New York City No More. So I figured I'd call back to that, even though we just talked about it. But yeah, folks, Steely Dan, Everything Must Go. Check them out. John is plotting his next move.
My next move, a band I don't think we've talked about very much, the Hold Steady. I love the Hold Steady.
Yeah.
Craig Finn it's one of those bands that I wasn't into, but then I picked up an album. Mm-hmm. I think I heard a Craig Finn solo album on NPR.
And then you went back.
And I was sucked in immediately.
Yeah.
And I just love everything by Hold Steady.
That's great. I have never listened to them.
Yeah, they're very, I think Craig Finn and one of the other band members, maybe Tad Kubler, met in a bar.
Oh, okay.
In New York.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. They formed in Brooklyn in 2003. And they've released 9 albums, and they're still putting out new stuff.
Yeah.
And they're still touring.
I know I've heard them.
Yeah.
I know I've had to have heard them.
It's one of those bands that it's not surprising when you hear them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that any one song really grabs you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of Americana music.
Okay. Cool. I could get into that.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think you'd like them.
I'll have to check them out. I mean, my list of stuff that I need to check out, because you've suggested it, is pretty extensive.
And Craig is originally from Minnesota.
Another hotbed of music.
Yes. That may or may not appear on a future show.
Right. That's a scene too. It is interesting, when there is a band that does something and becomes popular or sells a bunch of records. Of course, the record industry wants to multiply that and do it as many times over as it can. But it doesn't. I mean, I think it happens organically in different towns. These scenes grow on their own according to the music that the local bands are playing. And, I know I've mentioned it a couple times, but that Stax documentary is a perfect example. Booker T and the MGs, those guys lived in that neighborhood. It was a segregated time. Blacks and whites couldn't work together, or it wouldn't be looked at kindly if they did.
Yeah.
But they came together, and that music organically happened. And that's the cool thing about these scenes. It doesn't have to be somebody from that area, but it's a collection of artists and musicians getting together and letting the creative juices flow, and that's a beautiful thing.
And this was Separation Sunday was their second album. It came out in 2005.
Okay.
And it was kind of a concept album, but it's based on the exploits of a character named Holly, short for Hallelujah.
Oh, okay.
And in her quest to find balance between Catholicism and rock and roll through drugs and metaphorical resurrection.
Well,
there you go.
There you have it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine. Concept. It seems like bands are more and more brave about concept albums. Like it's something that's more accepted now. Like when the Who did it in the 70s, in the early 70s, not a lot of people had heard of a rock band doing an album that has a theme throughout.
Yeah.
But nowadays it is. It's looked at a lot differently. And I think it's cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I mean, with this, it's the songs are kind of funny. I love Charlemagne in Sweatpants. I mean, they're very much talk singer songs.
Yeah.
And they tell little stories. Each song's a little story. I think that's why I love it so much, because there's so many. Each track is a different little snippet of this story.
Oh, okay. Cool. Well, I'll have to check them out.
Yeah.
I'll have to check out the Hold Steady.
The Hold Steady. Check them out.
Well, my next one is, again, one of the first ones that I thought of. This is AC/DC's Stiff Upper Lip, and there's a song on here called Safe in New York City. And it came out, well, the album Stiff Upper Lip came out in 2000. The song was written by Angus and Malcolm Young. It was released as a single on February 28th, 2000. It was co-produced by their older brother, George, and the band. It reached number 21 on the U.S. Billboard mainstream rock chart. And the reason it's one of those songs, one of their more contemporary songs that stands out. I love AC/DC. I almost always have. I kind of lost interest around this time, but still, you still saw the videos and you still heard the new releases. But the reason that this is kind of notable is because the song's called Safe in New York City. And then, like a year later, the attack on 9/11 happened. And so I wanted to bring that. But I've always loved the cover of this, which it just looks like a statue of Angus in the middle of a big urban area like that. And then the picture on the back of the statue. But, they're one of those bands. They're an Australian band, and they're Scottish dudes to Australia, to the U.S. So, they really, they've come a long way for sure. And we don't have Malcolm anymore, but they just announced a tour for this year. I think they're playing 13 or 15 dates, and I'm going to try to go see them. I've seen them one time. But this is the song I thought of first when we decided to do the New York City show. And like we said earlier in the show, they do, like the Ramones, they do what they do, and they don't do anything else.
But they do it very, very
They
well.
do it very well. You need 3 chords in about 3.5 minutes, and then, you'll do it again. Have you ever seen AC/DC?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay.
And I wouldn't mind seeing them.
Yeah, it's just going to be a matter of what the tickets cost. I mean, I haven't looked. I've stopped buying tickets. Like when tickets for something go on sale a year before the show, not doing that.
Yeah.
I've started buying tickets like day of show. So if I can get some tickets day of show for a decent price, I'm going to go. They aren't coming to Indy. I think we'd have to go to Chicago or somewhere else. This song obviously gained some poignancy after September 11th and the attacks on the World Trade Center. Angus Young said that although originally the lyrics were meant to make fun of Rudy Giuliani's claim that he had cleaned up Manhattan, to me, New York is a city where you can never predict what's coming next. The song's got a great groove. It's AC/DC through and through. So if you haven't checked out, this is one of their 50th anniversary presses. I probably wouldn't have bought this and some of their more contemporary stuff, but A, I'm a completist, and B, these 50th anniversary presses, let me just show real quick, they're gold.
Oh.
And they've got the AC/DC 50th label on them. So, since I didn't have it already, I thought it was okay.
That's a worthy pickup.
Thanks. And I also bought a copy of Highway to Hell from the 50th anniversary collection because somehow my copy of that just evaporated. Anyway, it's AC/DC, Stiff Upper Lip, Safe in New York City. What's your next one?
Well, we're going to move to what's been called the class of 2001.
Yep. I know where you're going.
And that whole class was pioneered by a little band called The Strokes.
Yeah.
And this whole scene that was going on in New York, it was like the rebirth of rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And
back to basics type.
Back to basics. And there were all kinds of bands. The Yeah-Yeahs, The Strokes, Interpol, LCD Sound System. And it was kind of pioneered by a different band called The Rapture.
Mm.
They were big in New York, and then The Strokes were the ones that just kind of took off and made the whole scene bigger than it was.
Yeah, they kind of like what happened with Nirvana in Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate
it. That's nice.
Well, I don't know that we've ever used the word analogy on this show either.
Well, all kinds of firsts.
You know what a simile? You know what a simile is? It's a comparison using like or as. Anyway, I have this album too.
Yeah, you have the original cover.
No, I don't.
Oh, I thought you did.
Nope.
Because the original cover is like a female with is there a
cat of nine tails or
cat
something?
Cat of nine tails, yeah. And the record company's like, we can't do that.
Bare bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is the version of this that I have.
Yeah. When I heard this, I was just blown away.
Yeah. I mean, it's in that era. Another band from that era that was just all over the radio was Jet. Now, they're an Australian band.
Yeah.
But they were kind of part of that resurgence, that back to basics, not hard rock, but pop rock.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think that's what a scene can do. It can reverberate past its epicenter.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole thing that was going on with CBGB's in the Village.
Yeah.
It was just another scene that took off.
Yeah.
And all these bands were hanging out together.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really great. I knew you were going to bring this, so I didn't. And then you've got their almost like their mug shots in here.
Yeah.
But the Strokes have kind of made a bit of a resurgence. The last couple of years.
Their last album was really, I heard a couple of cuts from it. I really liked it.
Yeah. But they are definitely in that group, that early 2000s.
Yes.
They are definitely head of the class there.
And there's a great documentary called Meet Me in the Bathroom that kind of highlights all these bands and what was going on, that is a must see.
Okay.
You gotta check it out.
Cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. Well, that's a good one, man. And we don't talk about these guys very often. We don't talk about that class of bands very often. So
No.
So maybe we'll do a show and kind of talk about that group that is in that class.
Yeah, because there's a lot of bands.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not all obvious. I mean, just because you may have heard some of these bands on the radio at that point, but there are a bunch.
Yeah,
of
there are a
others.
bunch.
Yep, that's a good one, man. I love it.
Yeah, the Strokes, and I'm not kidding with this. I think it made my essentials, but every single song is just a rockin' good time.
That's cool. It's a banger, as the
It's a
kids say?
banger.
Okay.
That's
All right.
the Strokes. What do you got?
Well, we aren't gonna belabor it, but I've talked about this album before. This is Zappa in New York. This was recorded December 26 through 29 in 1976 at the Palladium. So it's multiple shows. And it was not released until December 26th. It was not released until March 1978. It was scheduled for release in mid-1977, but it was not generally available until March 1978. It reached number 57 on the Billboard 200 albums chart in the United States. And though it was his own label, Zappa did not authorize the 1977 or 78 releases of the album, and Warner did no promotion. At the same time, Frank gave interviews which described this legal back and forth with Warner and former manager Herb Cohen. The 1991 CD re-release was the first time the album was issued with Zappa's authorization. So this doesn't necessarily have Frank's blessing. But the reason that I bring it, and the reason that I've talked about it in the past, the music is great. And we've talked. His band it consists of the best musicians in the world. But the thing that is the star here is his conversations with the crowd. And since I never got to see Zappa and never will, I really love that because, I love Zappa's music too, but like the way he talks to the crowd and the stuff that he says is gold, and it's almost as great as the music. So if you get a chance, I ended up, I don't know, this popped up on one of my vinyl groups, and I think it was $19. This is a triple album. Oh. So, you're getting your money's worth for sure. But I just had to bring it because it's Frank at the Palladium for multiple shows, and you're just hearing
the audience banter.
The banter with the audience is really, really great. And I love Zappa for all the reasons that I've mentioned before, but he literally didn't care. I mean, he didn't care about offending anybody, and he did his music on his terms, his way, and we're still talking about it.
I think that's a very New York thing.
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of these bands, they weren't really worried about anything except making the music.
Right.
They wanted to make the music the way they wanted to make it.
They had one goal.
Yeah.
And you got to respect that. And then it's probably why we're talking about New York as a music scene.
Yeah.
Because of the ethos and the attitude of the people who made that scene. So, yeah, check out Zappa in New York. Here's a shot of them on the back. But it's so great. It's really, really funny. So,
that's nice.
What's your next one?
Well, I'm staying in that early 2000 vein, and we're going to talk about this example, LCD Sound System. Yes. And they only have 4 records, but I brought this. This is the London, what is it? The London Sessions, yeah. And I brought this one because it's on their label, DFA. DFA was a label co-founded by James Murphy and a bunch of other cats.
Is it one of those labels that you knew, or is there other stuff that?
I've picked up other stuff from this label. Now, another band from that early 2000s New York scene, The Rapture, was on DFA.
Oh, okay.
But it's just they have a lot of electronic music.
No, that's cool. I've never dug into them either.
Yeah, it's like Daft Punk, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love that you bring this stuff in here because, I'll bring wacky stuff or stuff left of center sometimes, but most of the time, no matter what the theme of the show, you're bringing something that probably most people don't know about or haven't dug into. And that's what this show's all about, is it's, we're talking about our relationship with our music, but we're also sharing it so that people kind of have a foot in the door to go and check it out. And we live in a time when you can do that for free.
Yeah, we want
awesome.
we want you to discover music that may not be in your front windshield view.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in the rearview mirror and you just passed it by. So
yeah,
here it is.
No, that's cool. What's the gatefold look like in here? Oh, it's their studio setup.
Yeah, it's their studio setup.
That's cool. Man, they got a lot of bongos and congas.
Yeah, there's a lot of drums, a lot of instruments.
That's cool. I love stuff like that, man.
Yeah,
that's really neat. They're great. I love the color on the album, just that light blue.
Yeah, they were nominated for a Grammy for Best Electronic Dance Album.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. Awesome. Well, LCD Sound System, folks. The London sessions.
Yeah. There's anything you get from them is going to be great.
Cool. They're going on the list.
Yeah, and they broke up, played their last concert, and then they came back.
Yeah, I think they broke up in 11.
Yeah.
Or 12.
Yeah, they played like several nights at Madison Square.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I mean, it was like a 4 or 5 night.
That's awesome.
And then they've since reformed and they've had music and soundtracks, but they've got a new album coming out this year.
Cool. Well, we'll keep an eye out for it. Maybe you can tell us about that when it comes out.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of jazz greats from New York, but I wanted to bring an example of a guy who's still around. This is Sonny Rollins. This is his Blue Note 1558 Volume 2. And I've got a lot of Sonny Rollins. He's considered one of the best living jazz improvisers. I brought this one because this has J.J. Johnson on it on trombone, and J.J.'s an Indianapolis guy. So I thought that was kind of a nice little tie-in. Art Blakey is also on drums on this. So Sonny, as he's known, his real name's Walter Theodore Rollins. He was born in September 1930. And like I said, he's played for 7 decades. He's considered one of the greatest living dudes. Although he's retired, I think he retired from playing in 2012. He was born in New York City to his parents from the Virgin Islands, and he's the youngest of 3 siblings. He grew up in Central Harlem and on Sugar Hill, and received his first saxophone at the age of 7 or 8. He attended Edward Stitt Junior High and graduated from Ben Franklin High School in East Harlem. He's an interesting dude because he started as a piano player and then moved to sax, and he's considered one of the greats. So, and then of course you have the treatment that all of these albums have on the back with the biography type stuff and some cool black and white photos there. I know not everybody's interested in jazz and not everybody loves jazz, but it's such a huge part of my record collection that when we're talking about New York, I'm absolutely
You got to have jazz.
yeah, I'm going to bring some jazz, and there's so many great venues in New York to go to see jazz to this day. You know, it's and I've talked about it before, but it's when I listen to it, it's just that couple of degrees off from everything else, all the popular music and rock and even country, that it flips a switch in my brain, and it's almost an immediate thing that helps me relax or concentrate. So that's why I love jazz so much, and I've always loved the cover of this too.
Well, in New York, it's not hard to wander in a bar in the Village and find a jazz band playing.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is super cool to just, walk in somewhere and, hey, we've got this great jazz band playing.
Yeah. We almost always, if we don't go to the Village Vanguard, because that place is so historic, if we don't go there, we'll find another jazz place to go to and spend an evening. Even though my wife's not a jazz person either, she humors me and comes along. But if you haven't dug into Sonny Rollins, give him a listen, because he's absolutely one of the greats. So
That's a good one.
thank you. We have one more each.
Yes, we do. And I'm going to stick in that 2001 class with a band called Interpol. And Interpol
I figured you'd bring this too.
yeah, they formed in '97, and it's funny, they were considered part of a post-punk revival because they have this very I don't want to call it dark. It is kind of dark. It's like a dark and brooding sound.
Okay. Yeah, I've never really dug into Interpol either.
Oh, they're phenomenal.
They were just one of those that kind of, out of my purview.
Yeah, there was I guess I didn't really even realize this until I started reading about them, but there was a post-punk revival in the early 2000s, and they were kind of the figurehead of that.
Interesting. I like the back cover is basically just a black and white version of the front. And I love it. I just saw this starts out with a song called Untitled. I always love songs that are titled Untitled.
Yeah, this was they'd released some EPs and, some singles, and this was really their label debut.
Cool. Yeah, there are so many bands from that era, not just New York, but from that era, like you're talking about, that at the time, it was such a glut of bands. I feel like they really competed hard for attention and exposure,
Yeah.
So just so many of them I missed out on because there was so much coming at you.
Yeah, the three bands, I've tried to cover the diversity that was going on in the scene, where the Strokes were more like a traditional rock and roll sound, and LCD Sound System was this electronic dance stuff, and these guys were part of the post-punk revival. They've been compared to Joy Division, which that's gonna
Thumbs up from you.
That's gonna get a big thumbs up from me. And they've been compared to Echo and the Bunnymen, the Smiths, a lot of those type of bands that I really grew up with and I loved.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Again, I'm going to have to compile a list. Maybe I'll do it and share it on social media. A list of stuff that I need to listen to because you've suggested it, and maybe I'll give my take on it.
Yeah, that'll be nice. What was this? Yeah, it was on Matador Records.
Matador,
another label I really trust.
Oh, okay. We're going to do a Labels We Trust show very soon.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to take some preparation, but It's I love the stories of these labels, and the independent ones, the big ones, and everything in between. And yeah, it's absolutely true. Sometimes back in the day before the internet, if you saw a logo on that record that you had something else from that record company, that was like, hey, there's a thumbs up.
Yeah.
You buy that. So that's a good point, and that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's going on my listen to this, suggested by Wheels.
Ooh.
I like it.
You're up. What's your last one?
My last one is Ryan Adams, Gold. And this came off, or the reason I'm talking about this is because the first song on this is New York, New York. Everybody knows that song, or even if you don't know it's Ryan Adams, you know the song. Gold was released in 2001. And again, the song, New York, New York, its original release date was supposed to be September 11th, 2001. It got pushed back to November 26th, 2001 because of the 9/11 attacks. And I have always loved this song. I love Ryan Adams. I know he has gotten into a whole lot of trouble in the last few years, and he seems like he's kind of gotten everything straightened out, and he's sober now, and he's going to be playing here like in June of this year or something. So I'm absolutely going to see him. He's just such an interesting dude, and he puts so much music out.
Oh, he is a prolific songwriter.
Yeah, I mean, he is just always putting music out, and I love that about him. I love his lyrics. I love his guitar playing and his voice. I mean, he's just somebody that was kind of on the fringe for a really long time, and then when this song came out, it was like everywhere. And I love the picture on the back too with the American flag and right behind the bed there, and then the different shots down there. But this is a double album too, so there's a lot of good stuff on here. He is, he was in a band called Whiskey Town originally, and I don't have any of their stuff. Anytime I go to like buy that record, I can't find it used, and if I see it new, like on one of the vinyl
It's
groups,
gone. It's sold out.
It's immediately gone. So if you get in Whiskey Town, kind of like Americana kind of feel to them.
Yeah.
But you can really hear his influence in their stuff too. But if you see that, I think he only did 1 or 2 records with them. But if you see them, just buy it. I think you're gonna like it. But yeah, Ryan Adams, Gold, New York, New York, and what better way to wrap up a show about New York than a song called New York, New York. We are always searching and struggling for show themes and ideas. So we want you guys to communicate with us on our social media. We want you to go to our YouTube channel. What else do we want them to do, John?
Subscribe.
Yes. And
Like.
And
comment.
And share. If you see something you like and you have a friend who's a music fan or a friend who's a fan of whatever we're doing that you saw that you liked, go ahead and share that with them. Tell people about the show. We also have some merch available through a merch store now. So we've got some coffee mugs. We've got some, can I see one of the Wheels approved stickers? This is a small version of it, but we've got some Wheels giving the thumbs up stickers that you can get if you'd like to throw those on your laptop or people's cars who park too close. Then
they'll chase me down. Yeah.
But we have done so many amazing things with this podcast, and we've all, this is the 79th episode. We've almost done 80 of these, and we love talking about music, and we love sharing that music with you guys, but we also love getting the comments from you. And, any comment. We just got one yesterday I was telling John about that is a glowing comment about somebody that just discovered the podcast like a week ago, and they're already 18 episodes in.
Yeah.
And we're talking, audio only at that point. But we love sharing all of this stuff with all of you guys. And we would love it if you gave us a subscribe and shared it with other people that you care about and other music fans that you know. So for Wheels, for Ryan Adams, I'm Jay, and we'll see you all the next time around.
It's a